So for building a list, lead generation in a fun way, I love podcasting.
Oh, yeah. It's more strategic. And if you say, want a podcast, but I've looked at all these places where they charge me like $2,000 for one episode, or they say, well, if you want us to post on Facebook, it'll cost more. It's like, let me just do it for you.
Hey everyone, Rob Ratliff here with the Entrepreneurial Odyssey, where we share stories of entrepreneurs, their successes, what they've learned, how they've grown their businesses. And today I am here with Robert Plank, who is a podcast enthusiast, trainer, teaches businesses how to podcast, how to use podcasting to bring in new clients, how to interview the right kinds of people. And he teaches all of these different things. And so I'm so excited about this because this podcast has been great for me and for my business. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about why it might be good for you and your business. Robert, thank you for taking the time to meet up with me today on this episode.
Excited to be here. A couple of Robs, right? It's the Two Rob Show.
It is. And I love that. So to get started, if you could tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing currently, what your current business is, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how you started and how that went.
Sounds like a plan. Well, my business is DFY Podcast, and my podcast is Marketer of the Day. And my day lately just consists of all these meetings, right? I do client calls, I do prospect calls, I do podcast calls, and I think that if you're serious about your business, you really need to figure out a way to make podcasting work for you, because there's so many benefits. And, there's like six different benefits to it, right? It's like you keep meeting new people, you come up with new content, but it's if you want to be an expert, an authority figure of any kind, you need to get media ready, as the kids say, right? You need to express your ideas. You need to stay relevant, you need to be a thought leader. And even if you say I'm shy, or you're an introvert, like you and I have heard all that stuff before, right? And it's like, well, if you want to be in the driver's seat, run your own business, like get on some podcasts, have some guests, be talking to people. It's not just necessarily about the work you do and the buttons you click. You got to just keep on meeting these new friends. You can't get stuck with the same old friends. And so I'm all about doing podcasts. I've got a show with 1,400 episodes. You're the second podcast I've guested on today. I think I have a podcast of my own later. It's just jumping from appointment to appointment, making it all work, building a business.
Love it. So what were you doing before this?
Before this, I was a computer programmer. I'm sure there's all sorts of things that you do, Rob, where you just you come alive, right? And so when I was 10 years old, I was kind of okay with computers, and I went to some kind of summer computer camp, and I was so stressed out about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to this computer summer camp. I don't know anything about computers. And I found my dad's old C programming language book, and I stayed up all night reading it cover to cover, learning about pointers and functions and all sorts of things like that. And then I get to the computer class, and I'm like 10 years old, and they're like, hey, this is a mouse, this is a keyboard. And I was like, oh my gosh, I learned all this advanced stuff. It didn't need to, but then somehow that never got out of my brain. And then when high school rolled around and we were learning C++ and learning Java and stuff like that, I just blew through the book in 1 week and went through every assignment and coded all this stuff. And it was the most fun I'd ever have. It was at least 10, 20 times more fun than any subject in school, including recess. And so that led to becoming a computer programmer, but I didn't like what I found as far as the research about my future. So I got really good and dialed in with PHP and WordPress, and I could just code all sorts of cool and crazy apps and programs. But then it turned out that the trajectory I was on was eventually becoming a middle manager, and then running 5 other programmers. And I'm like, I don't want to spend all day just drawing boxes and arrows and telling other people what to do. I want to be in the grease, right? Want to be the code monkey. And so I decided that I would put out my own ebooks and my own software products. And that led to just a whole other kind of positive business building stress, right? Figuring out how to solve problems, copywriting, web page, email marketing, list building, traffic. And then that led to creating higher ticket membership sites. But then now we're coming up on this AI era. I know that you're big on that, Mr. Rob, this AI era where it seems like AI has just gobbled up all the knowledge in the world, right? That they've taken up all the copyrighted information. So you say, hey, here's my secret system. And someone says, but why should I go pay you money for your secret system? I could just go into Perplexity or ChatGPT and just get them to show it for me. I could go on YouTube and I could get it for free. And I was like, okay, like what's irreplaceable, at least for now? And that's the service and the doing the work and the strategy. And that's led to what I have now, which is called DFY Podcast, where if someone has a podcast or wants to start a podcast and they get overwhelmed with all the 50 different tools and all the 60 different places to post to, my team just kind of gets it all organized and does it. So if you have a show, you have an episode, you have a Zoom recording, you give it to us, we cut it up, slice it up, and put it where it needs to go. And so it's like there's these transferable skills that started off from computer programming that now apply to service business, podcasting, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's it's great to hear you thinking future tense, what's happening down the road, how AI is going to affect even programming. I mean, so much, even programming these days is being done by AI, which is remarkable. And I think you are right. And I think there's this, I remember watching Waterworld with Kevin Costner, and one of the most valuable things that you could have on the planet was a piece of paper, something so mundane, and yet it was so valuable because it just didn't exist in a world covered in water. Now, the reason I say that is I think that AI is becoming everything so AI. Books are created with AI, videos are created with the AI, even podcasts are created with AI using, I can't remember exactly what I called right now. Yep.
Or Gemini, yeah.
Yep. And I think that the value of human created content, whether it's products, services, artwork, is going to become more and more valuable as we get into this digital world. And so that human touch of reaching out, hearing people's stories, talking to an actual human, I think is going to be more valuable as we get into this more kind of digital AI, everything age. So I love what you're doing in that. Now, when you went from the programmer to the podcaster, and I have to point out too, well, I have to ask you this question: would you consider yourself an introvert or more of an extrovert?
Introvert, 100%.
Introvert, and that's very typical, I think, of programmers that are, they're sitting behind the desk in the cubicle, very introverted. And I don't know if it's just a gift that introverts have to be able to program. I can't program for anything. Like, just forget it. I've tried. I don't speak the language. I can't do it. So kudos to you for that. So going from this kind of introverted job to a more extroverted, getting out in front of people, talking to people, putting your face on camera, how did you make that transition? Like, if I'm an introvert and I go, well, I just don't see myself doing it, how would you say that you were able to overcome that barrier and become more extroverted, at least on camera?
Well, I got better practiced. I think it's just as simple as that. And I got tired of being passed over. And I think that I really doubt that any introvert is 100% happy being isolated and alone, right? And so like I got to work after college, I got to work at a university, like at the IT department. And the work itself was fun because they'd put me on these like projects by myself. And I was like, yeah, an introvert's dream. And I'd get all the work I needed to get done like 3 weeks ahead of time and then drip out my deliverables to my bosses. So it was like literally kickback university job. And many times they'd say, hey, here's some book on Java Beans or on some Oracle software or PLSQL. They'd say like, hey, we want you to learn this new thing. And I get paid to learn. Like, man, that's like school in reverse. But then I asked for a nameplate on the door. Like, you walk down the halls of a university, the professors have nameplates, the workers have nameplates. I'm like, I want a metal nameplate. Like, get it and slide it in. It probably cost you guys like $3. And they just kept on dragging their feet about me getting a nameplate. And then they gave me a choice as far as where my desk would be. They said, well, either you can be in this desk in the center of this room when there's like people all around you and no privacy, or we can put you in like 2 hallways down the science building. And I was like, I guess I'll take the science building, but I kind of felt uh, well, a little bit exiled. And so it's like, I liked it at first, but then long term, I was like, I'm being held back, I'm being limited. And I think that hopefully someone's out there and they're an introvert, hopefully you can maybe dig in and put your ego to good use, right? You always think about how like ego is a bad thing. It makes you kind of be arrogant. But, if you're shy, if you're stuck in your little hole, then maybe think about there's people out there that are not as smart as you, that are less skilled, but that aren't working as hard as you, and they're reaping these huge benefits. So there's definitely a need to kind of figure it out, right? Be flexible, be adaptable. And I'm no psychologist, but I heard something that said like, well, an extrovert gets energy from the socializing, but then an introvert loses energy. It's like, well, fine, if you lose energy talking to people, fine, but find a way to recharge, because if your life flashes by and you say you have kids and you're not like a good example, and if you see your kids being shy or not asserting themselves, like, aren't you going to feel like maybe a failure in life? So you owe it to yourself to figure out these limitations and kind of overcome your caveman software programming and put yourself out there and be a social person sometimes when it suits you, when it benefits you, when you need to apply that skill. But don't just get stuck in what's comfortable, what's easy, and go on the path of least resistance. I think you owe it to yourself to figure it out somehow and overcome it.
No, I agree 100%. I remember when I was talking to my boss about leaving my job to focus on my own business, it was a pivotal day in my life where, I just remember this thought of where there's, no going back now. And I was in a little cubicle. I didn't have an office. I was in a cubicle outside somebody's office in the hall, kind of thing. And I remember talking to my parents about how I quit my job to focus on the marketing agency because it was growing. And they said, kind of tongue in cheek, well, you didn't run this by us. You didn't get our permission to leave your job, kind of thing. Of course, they were somewhat kidding. And I said, well, I was just tired of living my life in a little cubicle. I wanted more. I wanted my freedom. And my mom, so funny, she just said, well, why didn't you just ask for a bigger cubicle? So I was just like, I don't think you understand the concept. And so it's about going from working for someone to the freedom of working for yourself, which comes with a price. Building a business is not for the weak-hearted or for the lazy, definitely. So tell us, what was that day like for you when you went from leaving my job to focusing on my business? Was there a pivotal time or did you slowly move into it? How did that process work for you?
Yeah, there was a pivotal time. I had a conference that was coming up in the coming weeks, because those were the days before Zoom, right? Before the good old days where you can just go and dial in someplace and stream. You'd had to actually book a plane ticket, book a hotel, fly across the country, and go to some hotel room for 2 or 3 days just to mingle with people that you needed to talk to. And so I kind of had this job, and I had the business I was building, but the business wasn't really growing to where I wanted it to be. And I was just kind of like having this tug of war, right? Like, which is bigger, the 9 to 5 or the business? And I was just stuck in that middle ground. And I was like, I can't do this my whole life, right? I can't do the job and then the side hustle and then back to the job. It's too much switching back and forth. And so I started going to these networking events, and then I'd meet someone who had what they call a list, right? And nowadays it's like your social following or your reach or things like that, but it's the same idea, right? That the slowest part of your business to grow is your traffic and your subscriber base. And sure, you could run ads or hope you go viral, but the best path to success is to partner up with someone who already has an audience, and then they can promote you or you joint venture. So I started going to these, and then I would do these kind of like iterative product launches. I'd product launch ebooks and courses and membership software, but it got to the point where there was an event that I really wanted to go to. And I was going to some of these like smaller events in like Austin, Texas, or Orlando, Florida. And I really wanted to go to this one in Atlanta, but I couldn't do it because I was out of vacation days. Like vacation days and sick days, I was just like maxing out any of my time off to go and build my business. And I didn't have the days saved up. And so I looked at my bank account, and there was more in the bank account than I made in a whole year of that job. And I looked at my finances and there was more coming in 1 month from my business than I made for my whole year at the 9 to 5. And like, you don't keep all the money that you make in your business, but I was like, hey, there's a little bit of an imbalance here. I finally grown one bigger than the other. And then I went to not my boss's office, but my boss's boss, and I wanted to meet with him. And he was kind of nervous. I could tell he just seemed really nervous, like maybe like, what's his issue? Because I really kept like low profile, didn't really bother anyone. And I think he was worried that I was going to ask for a raise. And this was right around the beginning of the Great Recession times. And like, there was like hiring freezes and furlough days. And I just, he was expecting some awkwardness. And I kind of said, I'm quitting. And then like a huge smile erupted on his face. And I still never understand why. Maybe just the relief or who knows what. But like he was happy for me. And then we worked out where I put in my notice and then I worked for another week. And then I got to this conference and then I came back and put in like my final week just to like phase out and then document what I was doing. And then I was a lot less afraid than I thought I would be. I was more afraid in the run up to it. And I make different blog posts. I'm going to probably go back and find my old blog from 2008 about saying, well, here's the pros and here's the cons and here's the reason to do it and not to do it. And I had similar negativity that you were alluding to from family, especially of them just like looking out for me and wanting me to be safe and saying, hey, your job's got health insurance, your job's got you building your resume. But it's like, if you died tomorrow, your job would just go find a replacement. And so why do you give them better loyalty than you can? You can always find some job. And even more so nowadays, right? Nowadays, it's like jobs are more easy come, easy go. But then with the Indeed and the LinkedIn, the networking, it's just these sort of skills that you apply either as an employee or as an entrepreneur. And so I quit that job. And I remember that. So what helped was to have the data, the logic to overcome the emotion, because scaring a job is scary, and you try to like talk yourself into doing the safe thing, but you say, hey, here's the data, right? Here's the numbers, here's how the business is going, here's the pros and cons. And then I remember just reading about it and like people that have done this before me. And a big thing that sticks out for me 15 years later is that they said, if you quit your job, wear your day clothes still. Don't just start wearing pajamas. Don't start watching TV. Like, take it seriously. And I remember at the time, like the first day I was self-employed, I got out of bed and my girlfriend at the time was like, she's like, if I was working from home, I just would stay in my pajamas. And I'm like, yeah, but the mindset would not allow me to take it seriously. And so there's, a lot there, but it was simpler times, but it was real fun times. I'm so glad I did it. Glad I took the leap.
Yeah, it's, I remember thinking I'd be nervous, but as I walked out that door, the only thing on my mind was, on my last day, the only thing on my mind was, oh my gosh, I've got so much I need to do.
Yeah. No time to be nervous. No time to be afraid.
Yeah, I don't have time for that stuff. So you went from that into, what was the business that you jumped into? Was it the podcasting immediately, or was there an interim business that you had started that led to the podcasting?
So this was before podcasting really took off. This was 2009, and I didn't start podcasting until 2012, and those were solo episodes. I didn't do what we would consider real modern podcasting until 2016. So I guess it took like 7 years to get to the podcasting phase. But at that time, I was selling software, and I was just getting into more of the membership sites. And my focus then was on the momentum and on, like we're talking about, list building. And I would look at the numbers every day, and I would get like a daily report in my email from my autoresponder. And when I was getting 30 opt-ins a day, 30 new people signing up with me, I was like, okay, now we're in the sweet spot. And I made sure that every 2 weeks I would be launching something new, doing some new promotion. And then right around that time is when webinars started to become a thing, because we finally had the technology, right? And it's like the young kids these days don't realize that like every 5 years or so, it's like, okay, now we have good smartphones and Wi-Fi. Now we have the video streaming is good enough where we can do the Zoom. And then right around that time, like 2009, we didn't really have good quality Zoom, but we had good quality, like sort of audio streaming, and it was at least good enough to like show some PowerPoint slides. So that was the dawn of webinars being a thing. And what I think I did well as far as the doing webinars was I do one every week. As every Wednesday afternoon, I would put together like 30 or 40 slides, and I would get about 500 people register, and I would get about 125 people live, and I would just give a presentation, right? And I would bring up like a pattern interrupt and a problem and a story and talk about some alternatives and lead to a solution and say, hey, here is the solution for you. Here's my course income machine. Here's my course membership cube. And all these things that these problems we talked about that you could relate to, and you say, hey, I can relate to frustration number 3 and frustration number 7. Here's this offer in the last 20 minutes of the 1 hour presentation. Like, here's the thing that solves all of this. And I would do a little software demo, and I would explain how I'm like, you've had these problems, you've been trying to do it yourself. Maybe you've heard you need a mentor, need a system. Well, here's the software that kind of does a shortcut. And then here's the training that goes along with it that helps you out. And here's all of it packaged together in a single, we called them membership sites, but they were like courses, right? I was like, instead of like a monthly everything, it's like, hey, here's this like 8-week course, this fixed term membership site where we get you showing you how to get your WordPress blog set up, how to run your own webinars, how to build your own funnel. Even though I kept telling myself at the time, like it was a lot of work to build the list, type up a webinar, put together slides, present it, put out the replay. And there was like all this kind of built-in stress about like meeting my quota, so to speak. I was like, I want to make 20 sales at $9.97. I want to make 30 sales. I think it was just, there was something to be said about the momentum and the feedback from the buyers and the like constant product launch. It was a lot of fun looking back, but it was all about the building the list, and then at the time doing webinars and presenting offers and just getting that list that I built trained to open my emails, attend webinars, and buy from me.
So then the next step, when did you start doing more of the podcasting like we're doing now, and why did you start that?
I think that now that you mention it, I was always on the hunt for new traffic sources, right? Like if you're not focused on traffic, you're getting really complacent. If you say, oh, okay, I'll run the same ads, I'll do the same blog posts, I'll do the same social media posts, then like your business is slowly dying. You got to be on the hunt for some fresh meat. And I was always, I would get frustrated like everyone else with Facebook ads, Google ads, retargeting ads, solo ads, stuff like that. But I know that I had a lot of fun writing blog posts, and I would make it kind of fun and interesting, right? Like my nephew was born and I showed a baby picture and I was like, hey, this relates to building your list. I went to a basketball game and someone took a picture of me and I was like, hey, this relates to your sales letter. So I had fun in kind of like going back to the like beefing up the ego idea of like being an authority figure and just being someone who stands out, being someone that's not just teaching the same old boring stuff, but then writing a blog post. It took so many days out of the month to like make it like 1,000 words, 2,000 words, and have all the nuanced story and all that. And podcasting, it had been around for a few years, but it was like a very like geeky thing to do. And it was starting to take off, and they were saying like, yeah, record these audio episodes and put them on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and people can subscribe to your RSS feed. And ever since the freaking dawn of internet marketing, we've been fighting the email spam filters. And out of everything I did in my business, my best income producer was my email list, my autoresponder. But then the more I kept doing it, like those 30 options a day, it was like less and less because people would rather lurk or be on social media instead. And then the emails that I was sending to, I'd get less and less opens year over year. It was like such a decline. So I was like, okay, I need a new way of reaching people. And I would start with the podcasting, and it didn't really, those first few years, it didn't reach new people so much as it became part of my marketing sequence. So if I was warming someone up to the webinar course, I would put out a podcast that week about webinars, so it would be like in their mind, right? And it would be like they listen to the podcast about webinars, they attended the webinar about it, they got some emails about it, and then I could turn the podcast into a blog post and all sorts of fun things like that. And but then it still was only okay. Like I knew every time I put out a podcast about one of the products I sold, I could see direct sales coming from that, but I was just like, where's the growth? And then around 2016, you'd see a lot more of these interview shows happen. And back then we do them on Skype, but there were like all these directories, like radio guest list was, I had so much fun on that one where there were these speakers, and like, public speakers have always existed. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. was a public speaker, and there were these people that they would just say, hey, I'm an expert on this topic, and here's my resume, right? My speaker sheet. And they just go and they contact the Boys and Girls Club, the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club, and they just like talk about this. And it's just like, is that really a profession? Is that a thing people do? And it like turns out that is. There's people just, and some of them have said the same speech for 20, 30 years, but they go and they say it to new audiences. And with podcasts taking off, and this was before like Clubhouse and stuff like that, but podcasts were taking off, and there were just this huge profession of speakers. They were looking to get on podcasts, and so I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. And I'd already sometimes had guests every now and then when I go to like these conferences, and I didn't really know how to move the relationship forward and warm up the person. I'd say, hey, when I get home, let me invite you to like meet on Skype back then, but now it's Zoom Riverside, and be like, get on the show and let's have a conversation. And with it being more civilized, organized with the speakers, it was amazing because, and you know this exactly, Mr. Rob, you can have a show and you barely have to do any of the work, right? You have people like me come on and do most of the talking, but then everybody benefits because your show is like the like a home, right? It's like there's like the Dave Letterman talk show, and then movie stars come on, and some people are aware of the latest, say, Tom Cruise Mission Impossible because he was on Dave Letterman, but then some people tune into Dave Letterman because they hear that Tom Cruise is on. So it's like everybody wins, and then the end result is that you network with all these people, yet you get to talking to people that would never even have spoken to you unless you had this podcasting thing happening, and then you're associated with your guests and you create all this content, and it just became like such a thing that took off. And instead of it being, oh, well, what blog post will I write this month? It turned into like, what 5 guests will I have today, or what 2 shows will I be on today? And it turned into like such a machine. And especially as you're saying now, with rising above all the depersonalized AI, like what's left, the human connection, and it's stuff like this. And so it's turned into like quite the roller coaster of saying, well, I've got to run a business. I've got to talk to so many people, both in person, like one-on-one with you, but also just the people who are watching the show. You got to take it seriously. Got to be on podcasts.
I remember the kind of the aha moment for me. I kind of always thought about wanting to do a podcast or interview different business owners to talk about exactly what we're talking about, how they got started, what the pitfalls were, what their successes were like, and that kind of thing. And of course, as a marketing guy, anytime I'd go to a Facebook group and I would ask, who's interested in learning more about marketing or lead gen or something like that, it was crickets. I mean, it's so oversaturated, and so many people are coming at groups like that with those same kinds of questions that just no one responded. And just out of, I think it was, I had talked to a couple of people locally who came on a podcast with me, but I wanted to interview other people and I was looking for guests. So I went to this Facebook group and I just typed in a question. I have a podcast, the Entrepreneurial Odyssey. I would love to talk to business owners about how they got started. Is anyone interested? And I think I had like 50 people respond, and talk about building a list. I mean, and I say, send me your info and I'll get back to you. And you get this list of people because people want to be heard. They want their voice. They want the opportunity to talk about themselves, and it gives you that opportunity to learn more about their business. And eventually, some of those same people that I've interviewed will either ask me for help with their marketing or refer people to me because they know that's what I do. So for building a list, lead generation in a fun way, I love podcasting.
Oh yeah, it's more strategic, right? The hit me over the head method is saying, hey, buy my stuff, let me spam some group. But instead you say, well, I do want them to buy from me, but I need to be known, right? I need to attract the right people in. So you say, well, how can I deliver value first? Who wants to be in a podcast about this and this? And then you have these people that they feel like they're missing out because like, oh, I'm not one of Rob's guests. But then they see that you have all this activity and they see what they do and what you do, and you just become known in that way. And it's like with all the competition, that's how you stand out, right? By just showing all these person-to-person conversations, show how much fun you're having, and then if someone opts in or consents to be someone that needs help with their marketing, with their AI, they say, oh yeah, I was watching Rob's show, he's in my head already. It's a much gentler way of going about it, isn't it?
It really is. It's such a fun way to do it. I mean, it's so great getting in front of people and hearing their stories. And the other thing that you'd mentioned is the content. It replaces a lot of the blog posting type of content to more video content. People love video. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the ways you use podcast content.
Yeah, and there's a few layers to that because the straightforward way is, I mean, well, like any question you can ask ChatGPT, right? So you could literally go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I've got this podcast I recorded with Rob. What can I use it for?" And it'll give you a whole long list, right? It'll tell you that it can pick out tweets. It'll tell you that it can take these 59-second reels for YouTube Shorts and TikTok. It'll tell you it can pull out the best quotes, and you can use Canva and make an image and use that for Instagram and for LinkedIn. It'll tell you about the blog post idea where if someone is looking for a solution, right? If they're looking for, well, how do I automate my business? Tell me about trademarks versus copyrights, to use an example from your show. Sure, if they're really interested, serious, maybe they'll sit down and listen to a 42-minute episode, but they might just be looking for a solution to their problem, right? There's a concept called thinking fast and slow. If I'm thinking fast, I'm like, I just need this real quick thing solved. And if they're thinking slow, maybe they're thinking about like the long-term strategic next steps. And so if someone is just really looking for some solution, then you take that podcast, you take that transcript, you feed it through the ChatGPT, you make what's called show notes or podcast notes. And we've all seen this underneath a YouTube video, probably underneath this YouTube video, right? You see the most important quotes, the most important timestamps. So if someone is looking for their solution to something, we use ChatGPT and LLMs and AI to like give all those different shapes, right? Because like a 42-minute podcast, that's one shape. And it's like video and audio, but a different shape can be, well, here's just like the bullet points of what you're looking for, right? Or like, here's just the links. And so you use AI just to make output for all these different platforms, for the X and for the LinkedIn and for the Facebook and for the Instagram. So you use just the rawness that we're having here, and then you create those other different sorts of outputs. And that's like the first layer, but there's also some fun to be had just about the kind of the creative curation of it all. Because like what you could do, Mr. Rob, with your own show is you have all these different episodes, and you could take the transcripts for every single one, right? You have 95 videos on your YouTube channel, and you could just kind of feed them into ChatGPT in chunks and say like, well, what are the categories, right? And so maybe you have like a different people talk about like the entrepreneur mindset, and you can make a roundup blog post of like all the best stuff, and then point people like, well, if you liked how this person talked about productivity or this person talked about fitness, like you could just jump into more of that kind of episode. And then what I've been doing a lot lately is, have you heard of this show called The Rehearsal on?
I have not.
It's like some like comedy show, but it's a reality show where like he helps people where like if they're about to jump into a situation, he sets up like a simulation for them. So like if some guy was going to like confront his brother about some issue, so he said, okay, he like met the brother and he like secretly filmed him and got his appearance and clothes and personality, and then hired an actor to like play the brother. And he said, well, where are you going to be talking to him? And he's like, well, at this fast food restaurant. So he built like a duplicate set of the fast food restaurant and hired extras. And it's a silly, absurd concept, but it's just like, you know, if you're going into a situation, you're not sure how it goes, why not just like have a set and actors and rehearse it all kinds of 20 different ways so that way it's easier. And so I watched this show and I thought what if the same could apply to podcasting and chat GPT? And so what's a fun exercise is you could go on Apple Podcasts or YouTube and find a podcast episode similar to what you want to do, right? So say you're Mr. Rob Ratliff, you talk about marketing and AI, easily find a podcast about someone who does what you do on someone else's show. And you get a whole transcript and you could give that to ChatGPT and say, hey, what are the questions and answers? What does that host ask and what does the guest say? Question, answer. And you can look at all those questions and see the answer and say, he answered this about, workflow automation, the strategy, but my answer would be different. My answer would be better. And so you think about the iterativeness of that idea, right? Or the shows that you guest on, same idea, right? You could look at, feed it in the chat GPT and be okay, maybe next time I'll answer it better or differently. And even on your show, I know that you said, well, here's the 20 questions I'll be asking you. So what I did was I have a custom GPT that has my last 5 or 10 podcast appearances in my bio and a few YouTubes I made. And so it's trained on that. And I gave it your 20 questions and I was just okay, well, question 4, I might answer similar, but that's a good starting point. And so there's a lot of fun to be had in the curation and the rehearsing and the iterativeness of it to give you a second brain, to give you a different idea of well, did I say anything that's really catchy that I could use next time or in my marketing? Or just how do I stay up to date with what people are talking about with AI? And I could just deliver better answers to the questions that's there. It's kind of a fun idea, right? Instead of just blindly taking the AI output or just the kind of the boringness of let's take a podcast and make it into these 9 different outputs. You can be creative, you can have fun with it.
Yeah, so many different things you do it because you're creating content. And in this case, it could be 40, 45 minutes, 50 minutes worth of content. And you look at some of the Instagram posts, reels, shorts, and those things can be 30 seconds. And there's a lot of 30-second little snippets in a 40-minute podcast. There's so much content to glean from it. What I find really interesting is I will take a podcast like this, and you use Riverside for your podcast. I use Riverside for mine. One of the things that I love about it is it'll create these little mini clips out of the podcast, kind of like Opus Clip and those kinds of tools. And I find it so fun to go back, have the AI go through the 40 minutes, find these little 30-second to 1-minute clips that the AI thinks are the most valuable little snippets through the course of the podcast. And then I love listening to those. And what's interesting is over a 45 minute or an hour podcast, there's this flow that's, hey, learning this, learning that. There's so much valuable information that you've given on this, but it's hard for our minds to comprehend everything that you've said. So when we go in, we create these little clips, and I go back and listen to those, there's all these little profound moments where it finds these little snippets, these little gold nuggets that can really help people and really help their businesses. And I love just going back and finding those and watching those. And of course, you can use that for Instagram Reels and shorts on YouTube and TikTok and, all these different places, just to put a ton of really valuable content out there that people can learn from and use. And like you said, it makes you more of an expert in all the things that you're podcasting about. So I love all the things that you had said there. So you mentioned some of the technologies. We've talked about Riverside. You talked about ChatGPT. When you train people on podcasting and they go through your courses and your coaching, what are the main things that you're trying to teach them to help them get started and run a successful podcasting, I don't know what to call it, a system or business?
I want people to be consistent. I want people to have momentum because that's how you get anywhere in life, right? That's how you grow your business. That's how you become known. That's how you beef up your skill. And it's like if you go a few months without going to the gym, if you ever played a sport, played a musical instrument, it's like you do it every day and you don't realize that you're on the slow uphill climb getting better. But if you take the summer off or you take a month off and you come back to that gym, and next thing you know, you're like your muscles are atrophied and it's like you're kind of having to start over. And it's like you're putting unnecessary strain on yourself versus just developing some good habits. And so that's why I still have courses, but I definitely have phased a lot of that out. And a lot of the focus is just on the done for you, because I'm just like, people are time constrained, especially even more so now. And it's more important that, like, instead of figuring out all these new AI tools, which is good to experiment, but if you're editing video and if you're editing text and you're scheduling posts, you're doing it wrong, right? Your focus should be on developing, building the relationships. You should be doing the more high value tasks instead of the $5 an hour task. And what's high value task? Well, thinking about the big picture of your show, thinking about like working on specific guests for your show, working on clients, working on follow-up, working on your own image and what you want to be known for and the shows that you want to appear on and how you'll raise your profile. And your brain only has enough space for so much of this stuff. And if you're thinking about all those kind of the big picture CEO boss tasks, but you're also saying, okay, well, let me export this MP4 into the Dropbox folder, then it's like something's got to win, right? It's kind of like going back to the, well, am I an entrepreneur or am I an employee? Well, sure, there can be a ratio, but if it's too out of whack, if the 80-20 is too much in the low level stuff, just because I'm maybe low on confidence or that's the way I've always done it, well, something's got to change. And the problem is you always hear about this thing called podfade, right? You always hear the average show lasts 6 episodes and people burn out because they don't really have a purpose. They don't have a system. They don't have a schedule, and they just kind of they dabble, right? They have a hobby, and a hobby is not a business. So they record podcasts sort of whenever. Oh yeah, maybe I'll have guests. Maybe I'll offload it to a team. But then what happens is 1 week you get busy, and then it's 2 weeks, and it's 2 months, and it's 2 years. And I think it's really important to treat it like a business and treat it seriously and say, well, what are my goals? What do I really want to happen from my podcast, which is to put out more social content, to have enough of the reels where if someone goes and looks on my LinkedIn, the last post was 8 hours ago or 8 minutes ago, not 8 months ago. And that helps you in a lot of ways, right? Because then if you're looking for guests and they size you up on social media, they say, all right, this guy, Rob Ratliff, he's posting all the time. And then when you're then looking to get on shows for yourself to promote your business, then they look at that too. They say, well, he wants to be on my show. And of course, it's a mutual exchange. But if he just comes on my show and I never hear from him again and he never promotes it, then that's a real lopsided deal, right? It's like, of course, he's benefiting from being on my show, so that guests need to promote as well. And if they see that you're posting, that you have a decent following, that you've done all these proper things that you should be as a public speaker, then they can see that you've done the homework, right? You've done the work by having that podcast and that you're serious. That's like the joke is, well, what's a college degree these days, right? Well, it's a piece of paper that shows that you stuck with something, right? That you could show up to classes for 2 years or 4 years. And similar idea with podcasting. If someone searches for the Entrepreneur Odyssey or Rob Ratliff and there's 0 search results, they're like, well, who is this guy? But if they see just pages and pages of YouTube and social posts, are like, okay, here's someone who seriously, he's kind of broken through the filter. In the same way you posted in that Facebook group, you got your 50 podcast guests, but how many more saw that and just didn't do anything with it? So it's like, are you serious or are you not serious? And do you want to work with and attract people who are serious or not serious? Well, if you want to be on that quest for the top of the mountain, then do podcasting and be consistent with it. Answer your question. The thing that people struggle with and the thing that I push people for is by doing something on a regular routine. Put out that podcast every week. Record more episodes than you need. That way you're on like an advanced schedule. and have a team do the editing, do the scheduling for you. That way you can be focusing on growing the show.
Love it. So your ideal customers, whereas the listeners are here and listening to this podcast, would you say is the ideal business or client that could really benefit from your services? And you would say, if this is you now, you should call me because I can help you.
If you have the envy, the FOMO of seeing attorneys, accountants, contractors is putting out all the video content effortlessly, and they seem to have that social presence, they get likes, they get comments, and you say, I want that, I want the phone ringing, I want people coming to me, then we should talk. And I especially like real estate investors and I like warrior dads, but I don't limit myself to that. But I just think that it's really important, if you want to have a legacy, if you want to be known for something, to put out years worth of content, to put out hundreds of podcast episodes, to put out thousands of videos, because most people won't, right? The ones that are serious will. But if you're someone that says, I've got good stuff to say and I've got people that I want to help, but my profile is not where I want it to be, then we should talk, because we all have better things to do, right? We're all so busy, but if you just have these appointments on the calendar, such as the appointment that you and I are in right now, Mr. Rob, you have this conversation, you demonstrate some value, and then me and my team cut it up and put it in all the places, right? YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, TikTok, X, all the places, then you can just focus on what's important. So my people are those that are thought leaders, that want a higher profile and want more reach.
Love it. All right. So along those lines, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
DFYpodcast.com. When you go there, it explains my offer. At the moment, it's $497 a month for unlimited podcast episodes. So and right now I have a client who has 3 shows, and every show has an episode coming out every day. His name's Ralph Estep. He's a financial Christian coach. And so, but then I have some people like Maria Romano, who is a wedding officiant, and she just puts out an episode every week. So I like to keep things simple. And if you say, I want a podcast, but I've looked at all these places where they charge me like $2,000 for one episode, or they say, well, if you want us to post on Facebook, it'll cost more. It's like, let me just do it for you. Let me just show you what's possible. Let me show you what the fun can be with podcasting, and the fun that you can spread, because you know this from having all your shows, right, Rob? Is some people don't understand podcasting, and then when they do it, and they have so much fun with you, and you might be one of the first podcasts that they're ever on, and you make them feel so at ease, and it's so much fun. And I think you mentioned something like that before, of just there's running a business, and if you can have fun, and like there's all kinds of stress too, right? But if you can have fun and embrace the adventure, then that's something that you should pursue. And making money, getting clients, getting traffic, if that can be part of it, then great. And I think podcasts can be. But the bottom line is, podcasting is fun, and it's a way to help others have fun while also helping everyone out, growing everyone's business. So definitely pursue podcasting, and it's at dfypodcast.com.
All right, that's so great. I'll be putting those links in the description, and so people will be able to click on that and go to that page. I think, we covered so much stuff here. It's amazing how fast the time goes, and I enjoy just listening to other business owners talk about their business. And I think the value that you've brought today, just making people more aware of the power of podcasting, and in create not only content for you, but valuable content that makes you a thought leader, that in your circles, people look at that and go, wow, that guy's going places. And even though podcasting, and there's more people doing it now, when I tell people I have a podcast, it's like, oh, really? Wow. And it's still that almost a little celebrity-esque kind of feeling of, wow, you have a podcast? You must be really successful.
Yeah.
So I think even just having a podcast, people automatically already look at you as being a little bit more successful and more of a thought leader in your industry.
Oh yeah, 100%. So you need to do it.
I agree. All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up. Again, thank you, Mr. Robert Plank, for taking your time to be here. Of course, if you are interested in learning more about podcasting and you want help to not only create the podcast, but edit the podcast and get them out on the socials and build all that, then I would go to Robert's website and get more information there. So thank you for listening, Robert. Thank you for attending, and I'm sure we'll have you back again in the future.
I had a blast. A couple of robs. I rob you, you rob me.
Yep, love it. All right, let's do it again.
All right, guaranteed.